The week my son kept me away from my grandson's graduation was the same week he started planning to take the farm I had spent 43 years building. I want you to let that sit for a moment, brothers and sisters. Not borrow it. Not ask for help. Take it. Turn it into a business plan with my name crossed out and his wife's logo printed across the top. But the part that still makes my hands tighten around the steering wheel is not that he tried. It is that he smiled at me while he was doing it, like greed becomes love if you put enough sugar in your voice. My name is Earl Mason. I am 69 years old, and I live on 86 acres outside Franklin, Tennessee, where the hills roll soft in the morning, and the fog sits low over the creek before the sun burns it off. I have lived on this land since 1983, back when the farmhouse leaned to the left, the barn roof leaked, and the bank looked at me like a fool every time I came in with another payment. My wife, Ruth, used to say the place had tired bones but a good heart. She was right about most things. She was certainly right about that. We bought this farm when our son, Daniel, was still sleeping in a crib with one sock always kicked off. I was working 12-hour shifts at the power company then, climbing poles in August heat, coming home with my shirt stuck to my back and my knees sounding like gravel. Ruth was a nurse at Williamson Medical, working nights, raising our boy in the daylight, and somehow still finding the energy to plant tomatoes behind the kitchen and bake biscuits every Sunday. Daniel grew up on this land. He learned to ride a bike in the gravel lane. He broke his left wrist falling out of the hayloft when he was 9. He buried 3 dogs behind the oak tree near the pond. He had birthday parties under the same maple that turns red every October like it is trying to set the whole yard on fire. I gave that boy everything I knew how to give. I do not say that because I think children owe their parents a parade. I say it because when a grown man looks his father in the eye and says, "You owe me this," you need to understand what has already been paid. The whole thing started with a picture I was not supposed to see. It was a Saturday in May. I remember because I had just finished mowing the strip by the mailbox and was sitting on the porch with a glass of iced tea, still wearing my work boots, when my neighbor Carl pulled into the drive. Carl has known me 30 years, and he has the kind of face that cannot hide bad news. He stepped out of his truck slow, like the gravel might break under him. "Earl," he said, "you hear from Daniel today?" I said, "No, why?" Carl looked down at his phone. "Maybe you ought to call him." Now, I have lived long enough to know that when a man says, "Maybe you ought to," in that tone, he has already seen something he wishes he had not. I held out my hand. Carl hesitated, then passed me the phone. There was my grandson, Caleb, in a blue cap and gown, standing on a stage at his high school graduation. My grandson. The boy I taught to fish in my pond. The boy who used to sit beside me on the tractor and ask why the moon followed us home. The boy whose first truck I helped Daniel buy, even though Daniel never told him where the last $2,000 came from. There was Caleb smiling with his diploma. There was Daniel, my son, clapping beside him. There was Daniel's wife, Marissa, wearing pearls and that careful church smile she puts on when pictures are being taken. There were Marissa's parents, her sisters, Daniel's golf buddies, neighbors I barely recognized, and at least 90 people crowded into a rented pavilion with balloons, barbecue trays, and a banner that said, "We're proud of you, Caleb." 90 people, one grandfather missing. I stared at that picture until the edges of the phone blurred. Carl shifted his weight. "I'm sorry, Earl. I figured you knew." I handed the phone back. I didn't. He opened his mouth, but I raised a hand. Not because I was angry at him, because if he said one kind word, just one, I was going to fall apart right there in front of him, and I have never been a man who likes to break in public. After Carl left, I went inside and called Daniel. He did not answer. I called again. Nothing. 20 minutes later, a text came in. "Dad, sorry. It was hectic. Caleb wanted something small. We'll catch up soon." Small. 90 people and a barbecue truck is small now, apparently. I typed 3 different replies and deleted all of them. Then I set the phone on the kitchen table and looked across the room at Ruth's picture on the shelf. She had been gone 6 years by then. But sometimes her absence still had weight, like someone had placed a stone in the middle of my chest and forgotten to come back for it. "You would have known what to say," I told her. Of course, she did not answer. She never does. But I still ask. 4 days later, Daniel called. Not to apologize. Not really. Dad, he said, bright and careful. I know you probably saw the pictures. I did. It was all kind of thrown together. 90 people looked well thrown together. Silence. Then he sighed, like I was the one being difficult. Caleb's at that age, you know. He didn't want a big family thing. Marissa's whole family was there. That's different. That was the first crack. Different. I should have hung up then, but a father's heart is a stubborn old mule. It will keep pulling weight long after the wagon is broken. I would have liked to see him graduate, I said. I know. We'll do dinner soon. We've been doing soon for 2 years. He did not like that. I could hear it in the way his voice flattened. Dad, don't start. There it was. The old trick. Turn the wound into an inconvenience. I looked out the kitchen window at the pasture where the grass had grown high along the fence line. Congratulations to Caleb, I said. Tell him I'm proud of him. I will. He did not. I know because Caleb called me 2 weeks later and said, Grandpa, I didn't even know you weren't invited. That is a particular kind of pain, finding out the boy did not leave you out. He was just kept from noticing you were gone. But that call came later. First came the concern. Daniel started calling more often after the graduation pictures. At first, I almost let myself be grateful. You do that when you are lonely. You pick up crumbs and tell yourself you have been fed. He asked how I was sleeping, asked if my knees were bothering me, asked if I was still climbing the ladder to clean gutters, and if maybe that was not safe anymore at my age. Marissa got on the phone once and said, Earl, we worry about you out there all by yourself. Out there all by myself. As if I was a cracked jar left on a shelf. Then the questions shifted. How much land are you still using? Has anyone talked to you about development? Do you know what property values are doing out there? Dad, you ever think about simplifying? I have worked around electricity for most of my life. I know the smell before a wire burns. They were not checking on me. They were measuring me. The landing came on a Wednesday morning in June. Daniel called and said he and Marissa wanted to stop by. He used the phrase, family conversation, which is a phrase people use when they have already decided what your family is allowed to be. They arrived at 10:30 in Marissa's white SUV, the one with the tan leather seats and the little sticker on the back window for her lifestyle business. She calls herself a wellness consultant. From what I can tell, that means she teaches tired women to buy expensive candles and call it healing. Daniel brought coffee from a place in Franklin where a black coffee costs more than a full breakfast used to. He handed it to me like a peace offering. Thought you'd like it, he said. I took it. You remember I make coffee every morning? He laughed too loudly. Come on, Dad, live a little. We sat in the living room. Ruth's quilt was folded over the back of the sofa. Marissa looked at it for half a second, then looked away like it was clutter. Daniel kept tapping his fingers against his cup. They talked about Caleb. They talked about the heat. They talked about Marissa's business. They talked about everything except the thing they had come to say. Finally, Marissa leaned forward, placed both hands on her knees, and smiled at me with all her teeth. Earl, we've been thinking about the farm. There it was. Daniel cleared his throat. Dad, you know I'm your only child. I had heard. He did not smile. This place is too much for one man. And with Caleb starting college and Marissa's brand growing, we've been looking at ways to build something lasting. And lasting, I said. Marissa nodded quickly, encouraged. Exactly. A retreat center. Rustic, upscale, faith-friendly, family-oriented. We could use the barn for events, turn the lower pasture into cabins, maybe put in a small spa near the pond. I looked at Daniel. A spa. He would not meet my eyes. Marissa kept going. The land is just sitting here, Earl. It could serve people. Now that nearly made me laugh. The land had served people for 43 years. It had fed us, sheltered us, raised my son, held my wife's garden, given neighbors hay when their fields flooded, hosted church picnics, and offered peace to anyone who knew how to stand still long enough to hear it. But because it was not making Marissa money, it was just sitting here. Daniel leaned forward. We're not trying to push you out. We'd build you a little place near the back ridge. Something easier. No stairs. And a little place. Dad, don't make it sound bad. What exactly are you asking me? Marissa looked at Daniel. Daniel inhaled, and I knew the words had been rehearsed in the SUV. We need you to transfer the farm into my name, he said. Not today, obviously, but soon. We can handle the loans, permits, the development plan. You can stay here while we get started. And if I say no? His jaw tightened. Marissa reached across and touched my arm. I looked down at her hand until she removed it. Earl, she said softly, family has to think generationally. Daniel nodded, then said the sentence that changed how I saw him forever. Dad, you owe me this. I'm your son. This should be mine. The room went so quiet I could hear the old clock in the hall ticking like it was counting down to something. I looked at my son, and for a second I saw him at 6 years old, asleep in the recliner with chocolate on his face. Then I saw him at 16, slamming the truck door because I told him no. Then I saw him in that graduation picture, smiling under a banner while I sat home with grass clippings on my boots and no idea my grandson was walking a stage. You're my son, I said. He softened, thinking he had won, and I love you. Marissa's shoulders dropped with relief. Then I set the coffee on the table and stood up. But love is not a deed. Daniel blinked. I walked toward the hallway. Where are you going? Marissa asked. To make a call. Daniel actually smiled. He thought I meant the bank, or my attorney, or maybe a surveyor. He did not know I had made the first call 5 weeks earlier. He did not know that the morning after I saw those graduation pictures, I sat at this same kitchen table until dawn, staring at Ruth's photo, and finally admitted what I had been trying not to know. He did not know about the meeting I had already had in Columbia, Tennessee, with a man named Sergeant Thomas Avery, and he did not know what was already sitting on my attorney's desk, waiting for my signature. I stepped into my bedroom, closed the door, and called Laura Bennett, my attorney. It's happening, I said. Laura did not ask what. She knew. Are they there now? In my living room. Did he ask directly? He told me I owed him the farm. There was a pause, and in that pause, I heard every warning Laura had given me about grief, pressure, family, and timing. Then she said, come in this afternoon, we'll finish it. When I walked back into the living room, Daniel and Marissa were whispering. They stopped as soon as they saw me. I'll need a few days, I said. Daniel nodded too fast. Of course. Marissa smiled like a woman watching a door open. A few days, she said, is perfectly fine. No, it was not. It was too late. Now I need to tell you about Ruth, because none of this makes sense without her. My wife believed in two things with almost religious devotion: hot food and second chances. She could not pass a stranded person without stopping, could not hear about a sick neighbor without making soup, could not see a young soldier in uniform without slipping him a 20 and telling him to call his mother. Her younger brother, Paul, came home from Afghanistan, a different man. He was not broken, exactly. Ruth hated that word. She said people were not dishes, but something in him had been bent hard. He slept in his truck for a while, drank too much, disappeared for weeks, came back ashamed, and left again before anyone could love him properly. One winter night, Paul froze to death behind a closed feed store in Murfreesboro. He was 32. Ruth never got over it. She kept a picture of him in our kitchen, right beside Daniel's school photos. Every Thanksgiving, she set an extra plate, and every Thanksgiving, Daniel rolled his eyes once he got old enough to think tenderness was embarrassing. After Paul died, Ruth started volunteering at a veterans outreach center called Second Watch. It was small then, just a rented building with bad carpet and a coffee pot that looked older than I was. They helped veterans who had nowhere steady to go. Men and women who had served, come home, and discovered that the country loves uniforms better than it loves the people inside them. Ruth cooked for them twice a month. I drove her. At first, I stayed in the truck. I told myself it was her thing. Then one evening, she came outside with a young man named Luis who needed work boots for a warehouse job. I had an extra pair in the bed of my truck. He took them with both hands like I had given him gold. After that, I stopped waiting in the truck. Over the years, Second Watch became part of our lives. I fixed their plumbing. I hauled donated furniture. Ruth cooked chili, casseroles, chicken, and dumplings, anything that made a room smell like somebody cared. When she got sick, those veterans came to our house in shifts and built her a ramp before I could even price the lumber. The last time Ruth was strong enough to sit on the porch, she looked out over the lower pasture and said, "That land could hold people, Earl." I said, "It holds cows." She smiled. "You know what I mean." I did. After she passed, I did not do anything with that thought for a while. Grief makes even simple tasks feel like carrying lumber uphill in the rain, but I kept helping second watch. Quietly, mostly. I donated hay money. I paid for truck repairs. I let their director bring veterans out to fish in the pond on Sunday afternoons. Sometimes they just sat there and said nothing, and I understood that kind of prayer. Sergeant Thomas Avery took over second watch 3 years ago. He is 63, retired Army, stiff knee, gentle voice. He can make a room full of rough men listen without raising his voice. He came to me one afternoon in April and said they were losing their lease. "We need land," he said. "Not a handout. A place to build something useful. Tiny cabins, workshops, a garden, maybe a carpentry program. Somewhere people can learn to be steady again." I thought of Ruth on the porch. That night, I walked the lower pasture until the sun went down. 5 weeks before Daniel asked for the farm, I called Thomas and said, "If we do this, we do it right. Nobody pushes me out of my home. Nobody sells the land. Nobody uses Ruth's name for a plaque and forgets what she meant." He said, "Yes, sir." I called Laura Bennett the next morning. Laura is not the kind of attorney who says dramatic things. She wears gray suits, keeps peppermint in a glass dish, and looks at foolishness like it owes her an explanation. She told me what was possible. I could keep a life estate in the farmhouse and the 10 acres around it. I could place the lower 40 acres into a land trust for second watch to use as a veterans transition farm. I could put development restrictions on the remaining acres, so nobody could carve Ruth's garden into luxury cabins after I was gone. I could keep my retirement accounts, medical fund, and enough savings to live with dignity. I could make Daniel the beneficiary of a modest insurance policy, not because he deserved it that week, but because he was still my son. That way, Laura said, you are not giving everything away in anger. I'm not angry, I told her. She looked over her glasses. Earl, all right, I said. I'm angry, but I'm not confused. The documents took weeks. Surveys, appraisals, tax planning, trust language, legal descriptions of fence lines I had mended myself. Every detail reviewed twice because I knew Daniel and Marissa would look for a crack. The final signature happened 6 days after Daniel told me I owed him the farm. Laura's office smelled like lemon polish and printer ink. Thomas Avery sat beside me, hat in his lap, saying almost nothing. When Laura slid the documents across the table, my hand trembled once. Not because I doubted, because I understood. A farm is not just dirt. It is mornings, arguments, weather, birthdays, funerals, paid bills, broken equipment, and a wife's voice calling you in for supper. I signed anyway. Laura notarized. Her assistant witnessed. The county recorded the transfer that afternoon. When it was done, Thomas stood, and for a moment, I thought he might salute me. Instead, he took my hand in both of his. Ruth would be proud, he said. That nearly did me in. I drove home without the radio on. Daniel called the next morning. His voice was bright, too bright. Dad, Marissa and I were thinking we could come by Friday. Maybe start looking at the property lines and talk next steps. Friday works, I said. He paused. Really? 10 o'clock. Should we bring anything? No, I said. Laura will bring everything. That made him quiet. Laura? My attorney. Another pause. Okay, he said slowly. Great. That's smart. We should do it properly. Yes, I said. We should. Friday came hot and clear. I was on the porch before 9, drinking coffee from my own pot the way God intended. Laura arrived at 9:30 with a leather folder and the face of a woman prepared to disappoint somebody thoroughly. Thomas came too. He parked by the barn, not the house. I had asked him to wait until I called. At 10 sharp, Daniel and Marissa pulled in. Marissa wore a cream-colored dress and carried a binder. I could see the words Mason Ridge Retreat printed on the front in green letters. My farm already had a new name in her mind. Daniel stepped onto the porch, smiling like a man trying on inheritance. "Morning, Dad." "Daniel." Marissa leaned in as if to hug me. I stepped back just enough that she had to turn it into a little wave. Laura stood. Daniel's smile tightened. "Laura Bennett, good to see you." "Daniel," she said. "Marissa." We sat at the porch table. Marissa placed her binder down carefully, making sure I could see the logo. Laura placed her folder beside it. For 1 second, those two folders sat there like two futures. Marissa said, "We put together some preliminary ideas. Obviously, everything is flexible." "No," I said. "It isn't." Daniel frowned. "What does that mean?" Laura opened her folder and slid the first document across the table. "Your father asked me to explain the current status of the property." Marissa gave a little laugh. "Current status?" Daniel picked up the paper. I watched his eyes move across the page. The smile left him in stages. First his mouth, then his eyes. Then the whole boy, I remembered, disappeared behind a grown man's panic. "What is this?" he said. Marissa snatched the page from him. Laura answered before I could. "The lower 40 acres are now held by the Ruth Mason Second Watch Veterans Land Trust. Your father retains a life estate in the farmhouse and surrounding acreage. The remaining land is protected by conservation restrictions. The documents were recorded with the county 3 days ago." Marissa's face went white, then red. "You did what?" she said. Daniel looked at me. "Dad?" I kept my hands folded around my coffee mug. "I protected the farm." "From me?" "That depends on what you plan to do with it." Marissa slapped the paper down. "This is insane. Daniel is your son. I know who he is. You cannot just give away family land." "I did not give it away. I placed it where it can do what Ruth wanted it to do. And I kept my home." Daniel stood so fast his chair scraped the porch boards. "We had an understanding." "No," I said. "You had a plan. I had a farm." He pointed toward the pasture. "I grew up here." "You did. This is my home too." "Is it?" I asked. That stopped him. I did not raise my voice. I did not need to. "Was it your home when Caleb graduated and there was no chair for me? Was it your home when your wife printed a retreat logo before asking whether I wanted a spa by my pond? Was it your home when you called me too old to manage the land but young enough to sign it over?" Daniel looked away. Marissa did not. People like Marissa rarely look away because they think staring is strength. "We will contest this," she said. Laura closed her folder. "On what grounds?" "He's being manipulated." Laura's eyebrows lifted slightly. "By whom?" Marissa glanced toward the barn, where Thomas's truck was visible. I laughed once. I could not help it. Laura said, "Mr. Mason was independently evaluated, advised, and represented. The trust, life estate, and restrictions were prepared over several weeks. He retained substantial personal assets. Nothing about this was impulsive or hidden from legal review." Daniel sank back into his chair. "Dad, why would you do this to me?" There it was. Not, "Why did I do this?" Not, "How did we get here?" "Why would you do this to me?" I stood and walked inside. When I came back, I was carrying Ruth's old picnic basket. The wicker was frayed at the handle. She used to pack it with sandwiches for Daniel's Little League games. I set it on the table between my son and me. "Open it," I said. Daniel stared at it like it might bite him. "Open it." He reached over and lifted the lid. Inside were photographs, letters, one folded program from Ruth's funeral, and a small stack of cards tied with blue ribbon. The first photo was of Ruth standing in the second watch kitchen, wearing an apron with flour on her cheek, laughing with 3 veterans around a pot of chili. Daniel picked it up. "You remember that?" I asked. He swallowed. "Kind of." "No, you don't. You were busy that day. You had tickets to a Titans game. Your mother had chemo that Monday, but she cooked anyway because she said those boys needed something warm." Marissa shifted in her chair, uncomfortable now. "Good." Daniel picked up another picture. It showed a younger man in uniform beside Ruth on our porch. That is Luis, I said. He lived in his car behind a gas station when your mother met him. He has 3 children now. Owns a repair shop in Smyrna. Sends me a Christmas card every year. Daniel touched the stack of cards. Read one, I said. He opened the top card. I knew which one it was. A woman named Angela had written it 2 years after Ruth died. She had been an army medic, came home with nightmares, and spent a summer helping me repair the south fence because she said hammering posts into dirt made her feel real again. Daniel read silently. His face changed. Not enough. But some. Then he found the funeral program. Ruth's picture on the front, her smile, her good Sunday blouse. The date I still cannot look at without feeling the floor tilt. Tucked inside was a note in Ruth's handwriting. The land can hold people, Earl. Promise me you'll remember. Daniel read it once, then again. That was private, Marissa said, but her voice had lost its sharp edge. No, I said. Private is what you call greed, when you do not want witnesses. Daniel looked up then. His eyes were wet. But tears do not impress me the way they used to. Tears can mean sorrow. They can also mean losing. I didn't know, he said. You didn't ask. He flinched. I leaned forward, my elbows on my knees. Daniel, I loved you before you had a name. I worked storms and freezing rain so you could have braces and baseball cleats and a college fund you used halfway before quitting because your friend had a business idea. I helped you buy your first house. I paid the hospital bill when Caleb was born because you were too proud to admit you needed help. I did those things because I am your father. But being your father does not make me your bank, your exit plan, or your unpaid investor. He stared at the table. You kept me from my grandson's graduation, then sat in my living room and told me I owed you the last thing your mother and I built together. I didn't mean it like that. Yes, I said. You did. And that is why it worked so badly. Marissa stood. Daniel, we should go. But Daniel did not move. I reached into the basket and took out an envelope with his name on it. This is for you. End quote. He opened it with slow fingers. Inside was a photograph of the lower pasture taken at sunrise, and a handwritten letter. I had written it at 2 a.m, stopped twice, started over once, and finally decided clean words hurt less than decorated ones. Daniel, the farm was never just land. It was your mother's dream, my labor, and the place where you became yourself. I wanted you to love it. But love does not demand ownership. If someday you want to come here as my son, the porch is open. If you come as a man with a plan to take what I built, the gate is closed. I have kept enough to live. I have given enough to matter. I have left you something, but I will not leave you my spine. Dad. Daniel folded the letter. His hands were shaking. Marissa grabbed her binder. This is emotional manipulation. Laura stood. No. It is estate planning. I almost smiled. Marissa walked down the steps first, heels striking the boards hard enough to announce every bit of fury she could not spend in court. Daniel followed halfway, then stopped. Did Caleb know? He asked. Know what? That you weren't invited. I looked him in the eye. No. And that may be the only decent thing left in this whole mess. He nodded as if I had hit him. They left without another word. I watched the white SUV disappear down the gravel lane, past the mailbox Daniel once knocked over, learning to drive, past the fence he had not helped mend in 15 years. Then I called Thomas Avery. You can come up now, I said. He walked from the barn slowly, hat in hand. You all right? He asked. I looked out at the lower pasture. The grass moved in the breeze like water. No, I said, but I'm standing. The first cabins went up in September. Not luxury cabins, simple ones. Wood floors, metal roofs. Porches just wide enough for 2 chairs and a man to sit with his thoughts without feeling trapped inside them. The workshop opened in October. They teach basic carpentry there now. Fence repair, small engine maintenance. Things a person can do with their hands when their mind will not quiet down. The sign at the entrance is plain cedar, because Ruth would have hated anything shiny. Ruth Mason's Second Watch Farm, a place to come home steady. The day they set the sign, I stood by the fence and cried where nobody could see me except Thomas. and Thomas had the good sense to pretend he was reading the installation instructions. Caleb came in November. He drove up in his old Ford, parked by the barn, and got out wearing the same awkward guilt his father wears, but softer. He is 18, and 18-year-old boys do not always know what to do with family pain they did not cause. "Grandpa," he said, "I'm sorry about graduation." I said, "That was not yours to apologize for. I should have noticed. You were graduating. You were supposed to be happy." He looked toward the new cabins. "Dad said you gave everything away." "Your dad says things when he is hurt." "Did you?" "No. I kept what I need, gave what I could. There's a difference." He nodded. Then he said, "Can I help?" I handed him a post-hole digger. He lasted 20 minutes before he got a blister. Ruth would have laughed herself sick. Daniel did not call for a long time. Marissa sent one email through an attorney. Laura answered it in 12 sentences, 11 of them cold. Nothing came of it. Then, 3 days before Christmas, Daniel came alone. I saw his truck pull in just after dusk. No Marissa, no binder, no coffee from town. He stepped onto the porch holding a paper bag. "I brought biscuits," he said. "Store-bought?" He looked ashamed. "Yes. Your mother would haunt you for that." For the first time in months, he smiled like my boy. I let him in. We sat at the kitchen table. Ruth's picture was between us, watching like a judge with kind eyes. Daniel did not apologize right away. People think apologies are words, but sometimes the first apology is a man sitting in a chair without defending himself. Finally, he said, "I was wrong." I said nothing. He rubbed his hands together. "Marissa and I are talking about things." "That sounds expensive." He almost laughed. Then he swallowed it. I let her get in my head. "No," I said. "You opened the door." He looked down. That mattered. I could see it land. "I know," he said. "I wanted the farm. I thought because I grew up here, because I was your son, it should naturally come to me." "And the graduation?" His face folded. "I told myself you'd make it about you. That was easier than admitting you did not want to explain me to Marissa's family." He closed his eyes. "There are silences that are empty, and there are silences where truth finally sits down." "I'm sorry, Dad," he said. I believed he meant it. I did not believe it fixed everything. Those are not the same. I got up, poured coffee, and put a mug in front of him. "The porch is open," I said. "The deed is not." He nodded. "Fair." That was the first fair thing he had said in a long time. I still live in the farmhouse. I still make coffee before sunrise. My knees hurt when rain is coming, and I do not climb ladders anymore because Caleb threatened to hide every one I own. He comes by most Saturdays now. Sometimes Daniel comes with him. Sometimes he does not. Marissa has not set foot here since the folder on the porch, and I sleep peacefully with that knowledge. Second Watch has 12 residents now. One of them, a woman named Patrice, has taken over Ruth's tomato beds and grows peppers so hot they could make a preacher confess. Luis came out last month and taught a class on changing brake pads. Caleb is talking about taking a gap year to work on the farm before college, which Daniel pretends not to like and secretly does. As for the land, it is still here. The creek still runs after heavy rain. The maple still turns red in October. Ruth's quilt still hangs over the sofa. The farm did not become a retreat center with a spa by the pond, and my wife's memory turned into branding. It became what she saw before I was brave enough to see it, a place that holds people. Here is what I learned, and I hope every parent, every son, every daughter listening understands it before pain has to teach it the hard way. Your children do not owe you worship. They do not owe you their whole lives. They will grow, leave, choose, fail, return, and sometimes disappoint you so deeply you forget how to breathe for a moment. But love is not a receipt they can cash against your dignity. I did not win because I kept the farm from my son. I won because I stopped letting the word family be used as a crowbar. I won because I remembered that a legacy is not what people can take from you after you get tired. It is what you protect while you are still standing. My name is Earl Mason. I am 69 years old. I built a life from overtime shifts, borrowed tractors, a nurse's faith, and a piece of Tennessee dirt that had tired bones and a good heart. My son once told me I owed him the farm. He was wrong. I owed Ruth a promise, and I kept it. Family love is strongest when it is joined with gratitude, honesty, and respect. Earl's farm reminds us that protecting your peace is not the same as closing your heart. Sometimes the kindest legacy is not giving people what they demand, but using what you have built to shelter others, keep a promise, and leave the world a little warmer than you found it.